Don Revie, wanted to build a football club. And he realised the only way he could build a football club at Leeds United, he didn't have the finances to go out and spend big money. So he tried to attract what he considered to be the best young players in the country. And he managed to get quite a lot. So we grew up together. We had about 14 players that were at the club for a period of about 10 years. Nobody left. Everybody stayed at the football club, and it was a very successful time for the football club.
You've got to remember, in those days, players didn't move around. It's not like nowadays when there's freedom of contract. When your contract's up, you move to another club. And you don't get players staying at the one club for 10 years, for example. Now, Leeds United they must have had 15, 16 players that stayed at the club for 10 years or more. Players just did not leave Leeds United, so therefore they've grew up together. The manager at the time was a father figure to them, Don Revie. Remember, these boys maybe came from school, down from Scotland or Wales or Ireland at 16 years of age, and they're still there when they're 30. So there's a strong father and son relationship with Don Revie and these players.
He was a manager supreme, really. Everything had to be done to perfection, drilled and trained to perfection. He kept a very tight control on the club and on the players. It was a tight discipline, and the players worshipped him.
When I could tell you a story about when I get called into a squad for a European match. I'd been doing quite well with the reserves and thought, well, I'm just along for the trip. We played Rapid Bucharest at Ellen Road, and the team got announced and I was in the team, and I thought I wouldn't even be on the bench or anything, and I was shocked. And he said, when Don Revie came up to me and he said, "Are you pleased?" I said, "Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted." I said, "But I would have liked my dad down at the game." He says, "He's been down here since yesterday." He already knew that I was playing, and he knew I'd have wanted my dad there, so I had my dad in a hotel and my dad got to see the game. So it's little man management things like that endeared you. And as they say, there's a cliche about running through brick walls. Well, any of those Leeds United players would have run through a brick wall for Don Revie because he did things like that. He was very thoughtful towards his players and their families.
2 or 3 days a week, we used to have to get in the manager's office, and he would be sitting there with a bottle of sherry, pints of milk and raw eggs. And he would mix it all in a glass and you had to drink it in front of him.
We had a cup game against Stoke that was postponed 12 times because of snow and ice. And we went up one afternoon, me and some friends, and Don Revie asked us if we would help put some stuff on the pitch to help get the pitch thawed. After we'd finished, he came in the dressing room with a tray of sandwiches and coffee for us all to drink and eat. And people couldn't imagine Alex Ferguson doing that today.
He'd take you away the night before a home game, for example, because most of the players had young families. I never at the time when Don Revie was there, but most of the players had young families, and they thought they got a better night's sleep if he took them to a hotel. And even if you reported to a hotel at midday, you'd drive your car to the ground, the team bus would take you to the hotel, you'd have a pre-match meal, and then you'd go into, the manager would go into tell you the team, go into detail about your opponents. So, I mean, we were probably working for a manager that was probably ahead of his time in those days. He was very, very meticulous.
It's fairly well known that Don Revie would give his players sort of thesis-sized dossiers to read about their opposition. These are players who barely finished their secondary education.
He liked you to know absolutely everything about the opponent you were playing against. So he had scouts and spies that would watch this particular team for the previous few weeks and see who's playing, how well they're playing, what foot they favour, if they're a good header of the ball, they're quick, they're slow, and things that you could hopefully take advantage of. So he was very meticulous that way.
He turned them into, I think, at the time, the most successful team in Britain.
People were against Leeds because I think there was a lot of jealousy because Don Revie had brought this team up and they were doing so well, and the other teams who were in the first division, they didn't like it.
Nobody liked us and everybody wanted to beat us because they felt that we were a bit cynical in the way we went about our business. I don't believe that. There were some fantastic players, and I think as the 70s progressed, I think they get more and more credit from the British football public about the way they played and the style of football they were playing. When we won the League Championship 73-74 season, a lot of experts said it was some of the finest football they'd ever seen in their lives.
I think the game, shall we say, was more physical then. You know, the players get away with a lot more then. The referees were more lenient. The game was probably tougher.
You had the hard men in the defence that would absolutely clatter anybody that showed the slightest skill.
Johnny Giles and Norman Hunter were two players that were fiercely competitive. I mean, fiercely competitive. And Billy Bremner just didn't want to lose football matches or get outdone with their opponents. And sometimes they'd bend their rule books, to say the least. I
was a different type of player. I played nearly 600 games from a football club, Leeds United, and I never get booked. So I used to watch them, but I never got involved.
I was no cuddly toy when I played, that's for sure. But I think I lagged behind a few of them.
There was a player called Rodney Marsh, used to play and played for England. He went to America, Rodney Marsh, and Rodney had a great trick. He would run into the box, and as a defender came close to him, he would clip his own heel and go forward as if the defender had clipped him.
There'd be 4 and 5 sending offs every single week. There's absolutely no doubt about that. They've clamped down on, I mean, it's the tackle from behind, for example. I mean, that was legal in the days when we played, so that pretty much let you away with anything. There wasn't the cameras covering every single angle, so you could get away with things off the ball as well. So there was quite a lot going on, and referees then compared to now, well, there's an absolutely massive difference.
An old Chelsea Leeds United game on television not that long ago, and a present day referee was watching it, and he actually said that if I was refereeing that game now, they would end up with 3 players on each side because everybody else would have been sent off.
Today, people argue that the referees are protecting them too much. They're protecting the skillful players, and the tough guys have got to be either cleverer or tone their game down.
But it's just with television, it's more highlighted now. And it's difficult for players now, I think, to get away with anything. I mean, you look at some of the situations, trial by television now for players, and it makes it difficult for them.
In many ways, when you look back, Brian Clough was ahead of his time, because the thing that he wanted to do was to keep the ball on the ground, pass the ball, move it around, a team game.
Brian Clough was keep it simple, play it to feet, respect the ref, nice and easy, sensible football, sensible soccer.
That is now what the top teams who want to compete in Europe have got to do. You've got to retain possession. If you don't, very often playing a continental team, you may be 3 or 4 or 5 minutes before you can actually get the ball back. So we've had to learn to keep possession of the ball, hang on to it, get passing movements, and it requires a more patient game.
I mean, we had great fun when we played. It was a great time to play. It was also exciting football. Sometimes it was a bit, let's say, near the knuckle physically, but the top players always come through in the end. And it's the same as today. I mean, the top players will always shine. The difference between the game now and the game then, you know, we didn't have any foreign players in our football club. It was more difficult for players to move abroad then.
In the 70s, most of the players were British. There was a lot of rivalry between England and Scotland. Like at Leeds, we had Billy Bremner, Norman Hunter, Joe Jordan, Gordon McQueen, David Harvey, all played in the Scotland team.
There was an actual time when I was at Leeds United, I've got a photograph somewhere in the loft at home that there was 17 Scots at the club at the one time. Don Revie loved Scottish footballers.
The reason for the change was work permits. England or Britain joined the European community, restricted the lifting of work permits, and then slowly we get foreign players coming into the game.
The value of British players is very high, so when you go to buy a player from another club nowadays, they ask absolute top dollar. You can usually get more of a bargain abroad than you can here.
If we're looking at the teams today, they're massively populated by overseas players.
Today you can go into the Chelsea changing room or the Liverpool changing room and you need to be fluent in sort of 6 or 7 languages.
I saw an Arsenal team very recently, there was not one English player in the team.
And I don't think that young English players will ever get the proper opportunity till the game starts to suffer financially. But that doesn't look as if it's going to happen for many years.
But if we look at the game today, with the influx of overseas players now, clubs, particularly those that are competing in Europe, have had to learn to play a more patient, passing game. So the game is sometimes slowed down to an extent that would never have happened in the 70s. 70s football was hell for leather, and speed, strength, endurance were the qualities that you would expect to see. Now clubs, to prosper in European competitions where there is big money, have to learn to play a more patient game if they're playing continental opposition.
Foreign players are coming into the country and they're improving the game and improving the way football's played in this country. I don't mind that.
In the 70s, the fans were from the local area. People would, get on the bus, go to the game.
I grew up with Don Revie and all the players that they've got in that era. I grew up with them. I knew them all as young boys, 16, 17-year-old. And as I say, getting to know them, going to training and everything, we got to know them very well.
We could play a match at Leeds United, for example, and maybe wander across to the pub across the road after the game, maybe have a pint with some of the supporters. That type of thing would just never ever happen now.
Funny enough, when I first played in the football team, I mean, I never drove till I was 22, 23, and I played for the football club till I was 17. So I used to catch buses going to the football ground, and the fans would be on the bus with you. And I used to catch the bus home, and the fans would be there, talking about the game. And they would give you their thoughts if they didn't think you'd played too well, in no uncertain terms.
I can recall once being in London, we didn't know how to get to West Ham. We went to the team hotel, sat having a coffee with Don Revie, and he said to us, follow the coach in your car and we'll escort you to the ground, and they did.
And the fans were so involved that they took measures of revenge on me. Fire brigades used to arrive at my house at midnight, bursting the door down, saying a fire had been reported. There's me in my pyjamas, kind of terrified. And I used to get abusive letters through the mail. Now, that was a degree of enthusiasm on the part of the fans which kept the clubs going.
I would get to Ellen Road about 1:15 for a 3 o'clock kick-off. Go round to the players' entrance, try and get a few autographs. About 2 o'clock then we'd queue up to go into the ground. Get into the ground about 2:15 and the atmosphere would start to build up. And as I say, then 3 o'clock was kick-off. After the game, depending on who we were playing, if it was a London team, we'd be straight down to the station to get the autographs before they got the train back to London. So it was a whole day.
I think the gap between supporters nowadays and football players is huge, whereas in our day it wasn't simply because we weren't awash with money. We maybe run about in similar cars to what some of the supporters, drank in the same pubs, ate in the same type of restaurants, went in the same type of holidays, and there wasn't a huge gap in the money that we earned and they earned.
Players then, they could go out in the streets, they could go to restaurants, they could go to bars, and I'm talking about top players now, and we were a top football club then. Everybody knew us in the country. But the publicity, the media focus on players now makes it so much more difficult for them to lead what I would call a reasonably normal life.
Now, because obviously of agents, it's don't sign the autographs, don't put your signature on this. They don't seem to be within the community today.
They've reached celebrity status like basketball players or entertainers, film stars. They've moved on to another planet, really.
The crowds would actually be the life and blood of the football club. The crowds that came to the games kept the football club going. And that's the difference, and the fans knew that then. So they get right behind their team, and it was like a community, because they were the people that were keeping the football club going.
There was no live coverage at all. You could never see your team on television unless you saw a match of the day where there was probably just one game on, and that was it.
Well, in the 70s, of course, the league would would not be happy to have live football, because that would deter the fans from turning up and paying their money through the turnstiles. That was the main income for the club.
I mean, at Ellen Road, say that, you know, we would be getting 50,000, 48,000, 50,000 every week. But they had people paying their money through the turnstiles, paid the players' wages.
They were earning very good wages, you know, pop star wages, but it's still not stratospheric in terms of, say, John Terry's £150,000 a week.
The money that football's awash with nowadays comes from the television. It used to be supporters were saying, well, we pay your wages because of buying season tickets and buying tickets to go to the matches. Not anymore. That's not the case. It's the television that pay the wages.
Today, we've moved on to another planet entirely, where the top paid stars are on, you know, 6 figures plus per week.
Basically, it's television, you know, that pay the players' wages, sponsorship, advertising. So it's completely changed. And I think the supporters sense that now. I don't think there's the same loyalty as such towards a football club.
There's something about going to watch a match live. And even now, when you can get your 40-inch flat screen TV and watch it in high definition colour, and of course you're getting the sound from the ground, but it is not the same as actually being at the ground and getting the atmosphere of the crowd, understanding what the chants are and getting the humour of the crowd. There is something, there's a bit of a buzz about being at a live match. And I think the kids of today, who perhaps watch a lot of their football sitting in an armchair, are missing out on something.
I think if fans from nowadays were lucky enough to get to Ellen Road in those days, I think they'd love the passion.
We're all working class guys, you know, and playing in front of crowds like 50 or 60,000, it was a dream come true.
When you hear people saying about the hair standing up in the back of your neck, you get that type of feeling when you're running out. The adrenaline's absolutely bursting.
Great players years ago would still have been great players today because they'd have adapted to the conditions. Great players in any era would always have been great players.